Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cinema A to B. This week, Ben and I are going to do a movie that kind of came up recently due to the unfortunate death of Gene Hackman, so we wanted to kind of honor his legacy in his movies by picking one of his greats, at least, in a lot of people's opinions. So we're going to be doing the 1986 David Anspaugh film, Hoosiers. So Ben, feelings, thoughts, emotions?
So this is my introduction to the late Mr. Gene Hackman. We got this on VHS, I believe, in 1988. Didn't see this in theaters. I was too young to have even gone. But we had it. It was a fixture of VHS in the late 80s, early 90s, and eventually we would move from Ohio to Indiana in 92. And I'm going to tell you, they get it right. I mean, they shot in Indiana, but like even culturally, they get it in this movie, and in the good and the bad of Indiana and Indiana basketball. They get it right that basketball is basically religion in most sectors of Indiana. High school basketball too, they've not been good lately, but Indiana University, IU, really good program. Butler, the Pacers have had some success, but it's as much a religion as like football is in Ohio or Alabama
Or Texas.
Yeah, it's really, and what's interesting, so this movie's like inspired by the 1954 Milan high school basketball team that actually won the whole state tournament. And the whole key to this is that Indiana had an open tournament, assless basketball, up until the 97 season. So like you had little schools playing against big ones. And unfortunately, Milan winning in 54, and then this film, I think, perpetuated like them retaining the open tournaments like style, and they really shouldn't have. Like, it was ridiculous. By that point, I was like, this isn't going to happen. And I was actually privy, I'll get to the movie in a second, but like this runs near and dear to me because I've sat in a regional high school basketball game in Indiana where our local town team was way smaller than the team they were playing. And it reminded me of this movie. Like the power forward and the center for our what would have been the high school I would have gone to had we not moved away was like 6'2", 6'3". And the front line of this school they played was like 6'6", 6'7", 6'8".
Yeah. And
they almost beat them. So, and that would have been 1993, I think. But yeah, the film is fantastic. I've got a like very personal connection to everything that this movie's about. I played basketball in high school. I somehow backdoored my way into playing really tiny college basketball. No business. If it wasn't a Bible college, I wouldn't have played anywhere else. Let's just say that.
But if you'd only tried a little bit harder.
I could have been in the NBA. Shout out to our old roommate Vlad, who used to tell me that on the regular. If you'd only tried a little bit harder. No, it's like, love Gene Hackman's line, like right before his first game, he's getting ready to open the door and he says to himself, "Welcome to Indiana basketball." And it's such a great line, and it's so true. Like, it's just cult-like there. And there's other lines that are just absolutely true. He's like, wait, why do I only have like 7 players? I thought everybody in Indiana plays basketball. And the one guy's like, yeah, most do, but not everybody tries out for the team. That was absolutely true. Like, I've played many of like half-court pickup game in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and like everybody plays. It's ridiculous. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, everybody plays basketball. I don't know if it's still like that. My guess, it probably is.
Maybe to a lesser degree.
Yeah, certainly. But yeah, I've as personal connection to this film, I think, as any movie ever made. Like, I've kind of lived it in some regards. But I want your take on this because I've seen this movie probably a dozen times. And we'll get into kind of the rest of it with Hackman and the cast and stuff. But
so, interesting enough, this was not a staple in my house. So, like, I didn't actually see this until probably late high school, maybe early college. I'm pretty sure it was in high school. So I didn't grow up with it. It was not a staple in my house. And I really liked basketball. I think that was one of the reasons in high school I played my sophomore and junior years. And I think just my sophomore year, not my junior year. That's right. So I really enjoyed basketball. That was actually my sport of choice during high school and really liked it. And so watched a bunch of these movies and just rewatched this again. While it's definitely parts of it are dated, and especially like that soundtrack is a little dated, even though that like theme is so iconic, like that whole like the actual theme is iconic. It does feel a little dated, but other than that, it's still a fantastic film. And there's so much that other sports movies have built off of what this has done. Like, I look at some of these things, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cliche, but really, it wasn't cliche at the time. Like, it is now cliche because people are trying to copy Hoosiers, are trying to do this. I mean, there's a reason why this is easily in the top 5 of best sports movies of all time on most lists that I looked at, if not either 1 or 2 slot, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And a lot of it, I think, agree with you, it comes from Gene Hackman just putting his all into it and just kind of bringing that kind of performance. And then like Dennis Hopper putting a lot of energy and effort and getting kind of an emotional response we all have for his character as well. It's like you have these amazing performances by just about everybody, and you do it on such a small level. It feels so intimate because, I mean, the team is so small that you really feel like you can kind of connect with this and you feel for it. I think they did, never lived in Indiana, have only been there a few times, but what I've heard is they really did grasp it. I mean, your director and your writer, both from Indiana, from small towns, so you really get a lot of that.
Yes.
Both of them, they try to recapture a lot of that because they both did Rudy. It's like 6 or 7 years later. And even had Jerry Goldsmith, who did the music for this, also did the music for
I feel
Rudy.
There's a lot of similarity in the style of music between Hoosiers and Rudy. But Rudy, he definitely realized that the synthesizer wasn't the right way to go because by Rudy, he had dropped all of that.
Yeah.
And Rudy feels thematically like a perfection of what he had built for this film.
Completely.
And yeah, I agree. Watching it back, that was kind of my only issue was some of the soundtrack. Now, as you get further into the film and the theme crescendos, that goes more traditional orchestral, and they drop out that synth kind of weird stuff. But yeah, that kind of threw me. I'm a little more sensitive to that stuff now, especially when you're making a period piece. Like,
yeah, it threw me off again when I was watching because I'm like, this is 51 and we have synthesizers going. Like, why? I mean, like, I know the movie was in the 80s, but I don't think it was the right choice. But again, nitpicking at this point.
Absolutely.
Like, very, very small.
Yeah.
So,
no, go ahead.
I was going to slightly change the topic. So if you're still kind of on topic of the music.
No, that's fine. No.
I just got to say, I miss Orion. Like, I know they made a lot of really bad decisions movie-wise and really failed. But I love their little logo,
I have nostalgia for all of these, like, defunct
like
production
Touchstone Pictures.
Coralco.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah,
like,
Coralco.
Yeah, I agree. Stuff we grew up with, a lot of those production companies have gone belly up. They don't exist anymore. So their libraries do, but they're owned by
other people.
Hoosiers was Prime. I own it. I was actually watching.
I think it's like Hulu, Disney has it.
Oh, is it Hulu?
Yeah, Hulu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I know I watched it on Disney Plus because they had.
Oh no, it's Prime. It was Prime.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, Prime Video.
What am I thinking?
Hoosiers.
Okay.
Hoosiers is Prime Video right now, and the transfer's great. In fact, that was kind of my motivation to watch it. I've got a really nice DVD copy of Hoosiers. It's got almost like a textured basketball slipcover on it, which is really nice. But
I remember that one.
Yeah, and it's a very good transfer too. But something to be said for watching it mastered in. I think just HD, but the colors all looked a little bit better, and the DVD can kind of look a little washed sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, it looked great, sounded great. They do some really cool stuff with the sound mix. They play with levels of kind of they'll die the crowd noise down, but then bring the basketball like hitting the backboard and dribbling up, and guys getting bumped because contrary to popular belief, like basketball's a contact sport.
Yeah.
Like football's a collision sport, basketball's a contact sport. And I know the NBA's tried to like take a bunch of the contact out of it, but especially this era, college basketball is still pretty heavy contact sport. High school basketball is still full contact sport in the United States. Like it's brutal. It took me a long time to even like embrace that playing basketball. I did not like banging around down there on, at least on offense. I didn't mind it on the defensive end, but I kind of shied away from contact, and it's a contact sport. And the movie does a good job of like doing that. I was listening to, they were interviewing the guy that played Buddy on the Dan Patrick show years back about Hoosiers, because there's a huge plot hole in the movie where like Buddy mysteriously just reappears on the team. Right? He quits. He's the first one to quit.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he's back.
And the other kid goes with him and then comes back with his dad. But they never explain Buddy. And he actually had a chance to explain it. And there's a scene there's a deleted scene on the DVD extras where Buddy does reappear about halfway through the movie, has a conversation in a barn with Gene Hackman, basically says, I messed up. It doesn't feel right to go and try to play for our rival. I've always wanted to beat those guys. I've been playing for Hickory since I was a little kid. And Hackman takes him back. And then Buddy ends up being a major player in the rest of the movie. It's really kind of funny, but like the producers, God bless them, wanted a sub 2 hour runtime. And so his scenes get the axe. The writer-director wanted it in there. Oh, and then, you were going to say probably about
the romance between him and Barbara Hershey's character.
Yeah. Well, the other thing was they felt like Buddy looked too similar to Jimmy. And so they thought they would confuse audiences if Buddy comes back and then Jimmy comes back, and it was like,
Wait, didn't he come back?
I think they're going to, well, he joins the team, but
yeah.
it's very different with the town hall meeting where they're trying to get him fired. But I want to get into something and see if you disagree with me. Okay. With this.
Doubtful.
Because I think you might. I think you might.
Okay.
And you'd have a good reason to. So the director, writer, producers made the decision early on that for the players, they wanted basketball players first, actors second. I think that was the right decision. And it's not that they picked basketball players that couldn't act. They wanted basketball players. Everybody that played high school ball. Yeah. Except for, I think Jimmy Chitwood, ironically enough, got cut from his high school team a bunch of times. Even Ollie, the shorter guy. Yeah. Ollie was a tremendous Indiana high school basketball player and had to fake being terrible. Like, dude could ball. They all could ball. In fact, Buddy might have been the best of them, like in real life. They made Jimmy, his shooting, but he said they all could shoot. Like every last one of them could just freaking drain it from 15 feet plus. Well, but I was curious on your opinion of that.
So here's my thought. So it doesn't surprise me. I do think, especially like Jimmy, a lot of times in the acting is probably some of the weakest parts. Are the shooter's son, whose name escapes me at the moment.
He's good.
Is solid. Like he really got those, but there's definitely a lack of acting. The players are actually so secondary to the story, that it doesn't bother me. If this ended up like closer to like Remember the Titans, or even Rudy, where you have the players being a bigger portion of the storytelling, then I would say you need to get with actors. But really, outside of like one or two scenes where they're interacting with Hackman, their job is really just playing ball, like, dribbling up the court, or at practice. Like, there's not a whole lot that rests on their shoulders acting wise. So I'm okay with that. I'm not upset in this movie. Now, again, I wouldn't do that as a normal aspect of most movies because you just really can't rest it on non-actors. However, in this case, again, they're secondary, maybe even tertiary characters to their own story. So it doesn't bother me as much. I'm not upset.
I think now, in the last 20, 30 years, I think it's shifted where if they made this movie today, they would just cast actors that just happen to be able to be passable on a basketball court. I think it's shifted in that direction.
And really, I mean, you don't need some of those shots you can split up easier nowadays or do some kind of CGI work to get it done. I mean, you don't need to have a single shot, one take of Hackman talking to Jimmy where he's just sitting there outside draining shots. That was one take. No joke. They did one take for that.
Yeah.
That was it. Like that's all he did. So that was really him just draining shots left and right. Yeah. They did an interview with him and he just said, it was really nice I didn't actually have to talk or respond to him. I could just focus on shooting. And so I just kind of tuned him out and just was like, I'm just taking shots. Well, his
technique is really pretty good. It's a little unorthodox compared to some shooters, but what he's doing is mechanically sound. So now my thing is they shoot so close sometimes that I don't think they give the guys enough credit for their ability to play. The camera's in pretty tight, and I think a lot of that is just them moving crowds around. I could notice it in the finale, Hinkle Fieldhouse, where the Butler Bulldogs play, which, by the way, was the largest basketball arena in the United States for 20 years. It wasn't until like the 50s that it lost its title. It could seat 15,000. They still play there. That place is incredible. It's like hallowed ground. Just like it's not quite as hallowed as Cameron Indoor, where Duke plays, or where Kansas plays ball, but it's close. And you could tell there's a couple shots. I can tell the edge of the crowd. It's real quick. They edit right as you notice it. And I was like, oh, that's where the crowd stops. In Hinkle, they were moving it because they were moving them around. They're like, oh, all right, we're going to play this game on this end, and now we're going to move. We're going to have the crowd move. Because they didn't have 15,000. I'm sorry, they didn't have 15,000 extras. I think they probably had 3,000 to 4,000 maybe. And now they would just do CGI crowd.
Yeah. But there was one famous cameo in the crowd. I did not catch. I just happened to read this. Scott Glenn was in the crowd, uncredited. I mean, he was one of the press corps people or whatever, apparently.
Interesting.
I don't know why. I don't know exactly where he pops up, but apparently he has a small cameo.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, I was going to mention back to the culture. So, like, I have to say this is not very flattering to the state of Indiana. I'm sorry. The kind of cold shoulder he gets coming into like an Indiana small town, it's legit. Yeah. And I don't know I don't think that's exclusive to the state of Indiana. That's pretty common. But I remember doing 8th grade at a private school just for a year, and I had two guys that like welcomed me with open arms. Like they were both really good athletes and really good in the classroom, and we just hit it off immediately. But I disrupted the social order.
No.
And so like the next 4 guys that were like friends with them, like just hated my guts. Like they didn't do anything, but they were not nice. And it just reminded this movie so much. Like with Hackman being like, what is it he says to Barbara Hershey? Oh, he's like, if everybody's as nice as you, like small town, like manners are going to get a horrible, I'm butchering it, but he's basically like country values are going to get like a terrible name based on how awful you've been to me. Because he's just like, wait, is this an interview? Like I
thought I got the job already.
Gene Hackman's so good at playing characters that just don't care what you think about them. His career was dominated by playing characters that just literally did not care what any other character thought about them. And Normandale's another one.
Because there's so many. I want to say the French Connection, very much so.
Crimson Tide.
What's the one?
My favorite role is where he cares the least about anybody else. Royal Tenenbaum.
Royal Tenenbaum.
He plays Royal.
I was also thinking the one with Will Smith, Enemy of the State, where he plays like that conspiracy theorist. Yeah,
yeah, so, he's awesome in that.
I mean, he puts in an amazing performance, and with that, I do also think he doesn't really care about what people think in real life, because apparently he was absolutely terrible on this film.
He was really bad to Anspaugh.
Yeah,
because it was his directorial debut, and he didn't think he knew what he was doing. And he's surrounded by all this 1950s stuff. And they shoot one of the first scenes in the barber shop, and he leans, or one of the first scenes he shot with Dennis Hopper, he leaned over and told Hopper, I hope you've got investments in other stuff, because I don't think either of us are going to have a job after this.
Yeah. He's like, this is a career killer. This movie is a career killer. Which, I mean, honestly speaking, is also what Orion thought. Like,
so did you?
Everybody thought this was. I mean, sports movies didn't do well at all. They only gave $60 million to make this film, and was just like, and what I was reading was like Orion actually had a really couple bad years, and so they were like just throwing stuff kind of at the wall at this point, and like they needed one more film for their slot for the year, and they're just like, okay, you know what, we'll do this really cheap sports movie. It's not going to do anything, and then not only does it, blow up and make $28 million at the box office, it also garners 2 Academy Award nominations. So, like,
well, have you heard the Hackman ADR story?
Yes. I was going to bring that up, but feel free to talk about it. It's fantastic.
So Hackman's been a total tool for most of the shoot to Anspaugh, and not so much his co-stars. Although there are stories of them being pretty brutal with people that he didn't feel like were bringing their A game. Because Hackman, and to his credit, he was always bringing A++ level work.
Yeah,
but so
I just
trashes the movie.
Tells Anspaugh and the writer basically to their faces. He says that after this is made, once it's out of theaters, the only people who are going to remember this are you two and people who live in Indiana. No one else is going to know this movie.
Yeah. Okay. So they get done shooting, and they've recorded everybody's ADR, everybody's voice dubbing, and because this is an era where location sound wasn't particularly great, and especially for exteriors and stuff.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to get Hackman to come in to record his ADR, and Hackman just flat out refuses and says, no, I want to see a cut of the film first. And so they're like, okay. So they bring him in, he watches the cut, or they sent him a cut or something like that. And they knew, Anspaugh and the writer were like, if he doesn't like it, he's not going to come in and record his ADR. Yeah. Well, he shows up for the ADR session, takes one look at Anspaugh and says, how the F did you do that? So my guess is after that, he didn't treat him like crap, because Hackman recognized how good a film it was well before it was well received. Mm-hmm. Like if he saw the cut and then agreed to come in and record his audio, then, it's really funny because I'm hearing the same stuff about Tommy Lee Jones.
What, that he's really tough to work with?
Oh, he's just terrible to work with. Yeah.
I honestly, that does not surprise me.
And hated the guts, hated Jim Carrey's guts on.
That's fair. I mean, you have a very serious actor who seems to be very serious in all aspects of life. And then you've got someone who is never serious, pretty much. Like, I mean, I think outside of The Majestic and The Truman Show for all of 5 seconds.
No, and Batman Forever, he hated him.
Oh, yeah. absolutely. I mean, come on. It's the real.
And Jim saw him later, came up to him in a restaurant. He was Tommy Lee Jones was mortified.
Don't associate with me.
I'm just going to tease that. This has nothing to do with Hoosiers, but some of these guys are just difficult to work with, and not all of them are. Most of them are not, actually. I've heard from people that were longtime assistant directors and producers and stuff that it wasn't the A-listers that were the toughest. It was that next tier down.
Mm-hmm.
That there were more divas in the next tier of actor down than A-list talent. The A-list talent generally was actually pretty chill. But the next tier down, there's a confidence there that they don't really have. Mm-hmm. And so they're just jerks.
Well, so looking at it from my side of things, I can also see one of two things happening. How you've said it, but also A-listers don't have to be the divas for the most part, because people kind of already treat them like divas because they're the A-list. Yeah, they grovel at them.
Right.
Or the B-list or C-listers are trying to get to A-list, had to fight for it, right? And so they come across as jerks because they're asking just for basics. I mean, I remember sets I was on where I was the E-list extras or whatever and stuff like that. I mean, as an extra, you're basically cattle. I think the animals were treated better and with more respect than the extras were. And then the one or couple times that I actually had some type of role in something where I was better than an extra, that still was barely the time of day was
right.
I was given. And so it makes sense. I mean, I can see that. I also think, actors are pretty narcissistic for the most part. I mean, to think that you're one of those people who are going to just, entertain millions upon millions of people, that
actors
you're going to be,
they're children.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I've always said so. People can get ticked off if they want, but the reality is you're making a living pretending. Mm-hmm. So I actually think you have to have something innately childlike still with you in order to be a competent actor, because you have to be able to take yourself to that place where you can pretend.
So are you saying I'm not that much of a child, or is that where it is? That's my failings. That's what it is.
No, you're still a child in all of the best ways, and your wife would agree with me.
She would.
In a great way. But yeah, I think there is a childlike nature. Now there is bad to it as well, like the tantrums and just.
And it's all about me.
Yeah.
Look at me, all that stuff. You know, and I want your affection. I want your attention. I want to be praised. All that different stuff. Like, you know.
Some of them, it varies. But yeah, but, you know, back to Hackman, though, some of his difficult nature is certainly attributed to his pretty crappy childhood. Like, there's a video, a clip of inside the actor's studio with Hackman. I don't know what year, but Lipton asks him about his father and when he left, and his father left him he left when he was 13, and it cuts Hackman right to his core. Like, it's difficult because he's like, yeah, I was down playing with some friends, and like my dad just drove by and just kind of gave me a wave. And Lipton's like, now you saw him again, like occasionally. He's like, yeah, but he was basically out of my life after that. Like,
wow.
He was close with his mother, but I can't even imagine the pain as a man to have my father walk out of my life at one of the most important age ranges, like as a teenager. So, and now to his credit, I've actually almost heard nothing but pretty good things about Hackman, like his treatment of the general public.
Yeah.
That like would approach him, or extras on a movie set or whatever. So I think he could be pretty nasty with director. I don't think he liked directors. I just don't think he did. Like,
he's like, you don't know what to tell me.
Well, I think it was like, you just need to let me do what I'm going to do. Like, I don't need directed. Like, you make sure the blocking's good and put me where I need to be, and I'll make it happen. Because they were cutting dialogue out of this movie too, where I guess it was too wordy. And he was telling Anspaugh, like, I don't need that there. I'll do something, like I'll act without words, and I'll convey the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and at this point, Gene Hackman is somebody. Like, he's done enough stuff that you know kind of what you're getting. It reminds me a little bit of that, one of my favorite things of listening to William Shatner go off on like a producer on like this voiceover gig that he was doing. Like, so William Shatner read the copy or something, and then the producer was like, well, no, we want you to kind of say it like this, and he starts to mimic William Shatner. And he's like, are you trying to tell me how to be myself? He's like, or are you trying me to do it a different way? You know you hired me, right? You wanted me. Let me do it. Like, I've been doing this a long time, you know, and it just kind of goes off. It's fantastic. I'm doing it not any justice of how great it is. Well, he has
a point, right? Once you hire Gene Hackman, there's nothing that he should have to do on your set to prove himself.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. Like, and I think Spielberg is really good about this and I think Nolan is as well. Because you've already done the hard part when he's handpicked you for the role. Your whole backlog of work has gotten you to that point, and then now it's collaborative. Now you just and Spielberg and Nolan are both extremely collaborative. Like, Nolan's almost had to shed this reputation of being like, he is not Kubrick.
No.
It was Kubrick's way or the highway. Christopher Nolan's not like that. Spielberg's not like that. They rework scenes, they rework blocking, do it this way. I mean, Gary Oldman said there was one piece of direction that Nolan ever gave him across 3 Batman movies. Like, one. It was it. So Hackman, and maybe he was just trying to nip that in the bud with Anspaugh of like, I'm just going to be mean to him from the get-go, so he knows, like, you didn't bring me on so you can think you can, like, micromanage, direct me through this picture.
Well, and also he was apparently the third choice for this film too. They wanted Jack Nicholson.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger.
No, Robert Duvall they wanted for this picture over top of it.
Duvall would have been good.
Yeah. Well, and Nicholson actually didn't really turn it down. He had something else going on, and he's like, hey, if you can push it a year, I'll do it.
Nicholson would have been good too.
Well, and Nicholson basically, I think, told the producers or Anspaugh, he's like, you had a great film, you know, or like you had a good film, did really well at the box office. But he basically said, if I was in it, you would have won Oscars, or it would have been an amazing film, like some kind of like, you know, full of himself kind of a thing. Jack being Jack, but
gonna need you to make 4 passes. Gonna need to be 4 passes before you shoot the ball.
I think it'd be. I mean, I can see it. I do think after having watched it again, just Hackman just has that right amount of angst, but yet care, which I don't think Nicholson could have brought, especially when dealing with Shooter or whatever, with all of his drinking and kind of getting it like, I can see he possibly could, but Gene Hackman has that, you know, that anger, but yet is also able to be somewhat empathetic, where Nicholson has a hard time, at least for me, seeing that empathy ever kind of really come out.
It is tougher. Yeah. Duvall could have done it justice too, though.
Yes, I think Duvall would have been the better choice out of Nicholson or him. But I still think Hackman actually
Hackman's the best of the 3.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
That's interesting.
But
so just a scheduling conflict?
Yeah, it was a scheduling conflict with Nicholson, and I forget why. And I think Duvall just turned it down because he was like, hey, it's a sports movie. It's a career ender. It's a career killer, much like what Gene Hackman thought. I mean, he also came out, he also talked about the fact that he was mad that wasn't Hackman that was mad about this. Who was it? Oh my goodness, why can't I think of his name? Dennis Hopper. He was mad that he got nominated for an Oscar for this as opposed to Blue Velvet that came out the same year.
I could see
he thought he should have gotten.
He's tremendous in this, though.
He is.
On a rewatch, I kind of take it for granted on some earlier viewings, and I was paying more attention to Hopper in this, and yeah, totally worthy of an Academy Award nomination. Like he's so convincing as a struggling, and he's like not a one-dimensional drunk, right? Like he's like this is a man like dealing with, he doesn't feel like just the town drunk. He feels actually like a guy that's struggling with something else, and the alcohol's just the outward manifestation.
Yeah.
Some movies it's just the town drunk, and like you don't really know why he's the town drunk. And you don't really understand completely why Hopper like is medicating, but it is made obvious that he is self-medicating. Like it's not just, you know, there's more to it. The film feels more layered in that regard.
There's definitely a bunch of subplots that come in that are also great character arcs and redemption stories along with just this.
I'm just going to say, like, the best sports movies are the ones that just allow the sport to be the backdrop for relationships.
Yeah.
And people going through emotional turmoil, change, and then hopefully coming out better on the other side. Yeah. This is probably my top 2 or 3 sports film. My number 1 is Friday Night Lights, the film, not the TV show. And it feels like a football companion piece to this without the happy ending.
Yeah. But that's a bold choice that I really liked. I liked about that.
I do. I love, there's scenes in Friday Night Lights that just give me chills, but
there you have the drunk dad for one of the players. It feels like not a ripoff, but it feels basically just, hey, we just plucked it into.
It's got a lot of similarities. It's like they've just switched instead of the coach being like more damaged, it's like the star quarterback in Friday Night Lights. So it's just kind of an interesting choice. But anyways, Hoosiers is a staple.
It is. Do you want to go back to Dennis Hopper? Because there's a great story that I read for an article that was interviewing Angelo, the writer. He was talking about the fact that he and David Anspaugh had basically written the scene where Dennis Hopper's character Shooter was going to be at the finals game. Like he was going to leave the thing. And Dennis Hopper went to him and was just like, absolutely not. Like, I won't do it the way it's written. Like, I'm not going. He's like, because he was actually getting over being an alcoholic himself during this time. Like he almost turned it down because he was like, this is so close, because it'd only been like a year or 2 that he had been sober, and he's like, absolutely not, would, like, having been through this, if he was serious about his sobriety, he would not leave that the hospital or whatever. Like he would stay there. He would listen. He would be, he would be on pins and needles on the edge of a seat listening to this game, but he wouldn't leave because the more important thing is for him to get better, to be with his son.
Yeah.
Like that's the real thing. And it's and that's the character's balance too, of saying, hey, what's more important, reliving in the past or drowning my sorrows, or fighting this so I can be a better father and not be so focused on something else, So I'm very glad that he went to the mat with them about this, because I think it does make it a better film. And they both agreed. Like there's after they kind of, read the scenes and shot, they're like, oh yeah, this works so much better.
It does. It does. By the way, the pacing in the film is really, really good. It's the same editor as Conan the Barbarian. It's kind of interesting.
Is it?
And he edited a bunch of other stuff as well. But I noticed, because I was watching it and I made a timestamp note just from a pacing standpoint. It's around the 12-minute mark. You've got Normandale's first practice with the team.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, that's great. That's just really smart, right? Like, so many other filmmakers, it would be minute 25, and we'd finally get going with, him practicing and changing methods. And that exchange with George is so funny. Let's get something real straight here. Your coaching days are over. That's a line like that is where Hackman's authority, he's never not an authority figure in any movie he's in. He's just too commanding. He's kind of frankly comes off too alpha to ever be real subservient in any role. And another Hackman movie that I just adore, that's getting a lot more pub lately based on his untimely passing, but is The Quick and the Dead.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and don't sleep on The Quick and the Dead. That movie's great. For what it is, it's just a lot of fun, and Hackman's a big part of that. And he plays such a good villain. He's absolutely diabolical in that movie.
Absolutely. So the thing that hit me this time that I didn't feel like I noticed before, and so maybe it's me maturing or just kind of picking up different things, but I love the fact that the dichotomy of even Hackman's character of Dale going from the first practice or the first game going, it's my way or the highway, and then at the end when he says, you're going to pass it to Buddy or whoever, and Buddy's going to take the shot, or Merle's going to take the shot. I forget who it is. And they all kind of look at him, and he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And they're like, Jimmy's like, I'll take the shot. And then Hackman's like, okay. And so he's also changed of putting his trust in the boys to realize so it's kind of come full circle. It's it's no longer my way or the highway. It's all right, we've gotten to this point of where we trust each other, of where we're looking out for each other, and I can believe you. And so it was a moment that hadn't hit me before that hit me this time that I really, really liked.
Full buy-in.
Yep.
From everybody on that team. And that's what the great teams all have. It's just complete and utter buy-in and trust and personal responsibility. Yeah. And
I think this movie does it well where it doesn't highlight that too much. It's definitely there, but it's not it's not tons of emotional, music or whatever. No. It's not see what has happened. There's a lot that's just kind of, if you pick it up, great. If you don't, then it doesn't hurt you, but it makes it a better story if you do. And I think that what makes this a great movie too is it doesn't force feed you or push those moments onto you of you can't get anything but that from it. Yeah. Well, yeah, and the whole lead up to the final game, he doesn't. It's all the hard work's been done already. Mm-hmm. He's I don't have a big pregame speech. No. You guys, we've gone over this. You know what to do. He kind of has to bring them back to reality because they have such a bad first half or first quarter or whatever it is. He's just maybe they were right about us, but they have that kind of moment of a little bit of self-doubt, and then it's then they start to problem solve, and he's Jimmy feels like he can take his guy one-on-one if we give him the opportunity, and then it's that's how they claw their way back. Yeah. But yeah, it's tremendous film, great acting, and even if you don't like basketball's secondary it should be. It's secondary. The sport is secondary in this. Baseball's secondary in Field of Dreams. Football is secondary, even in Rudy. Mm-hmm. Even though that's his dream, it's still almost more about his
struggle than
Yeah, and his kind of...
And that's what these all have in common is just is adversity. Like it's the same formula for what makes a great movie anyway. It's just using sport for the backdrop, which is perfect because sports, like especially sports in America with all these sports we've come up with along with Canadians. A winter conditioning sport for football invented by a Canadian.
Yep.
Basketball. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It was my favorite sport growing up to play. It's not really my favorite to watch anymore, but basketball in person is really good. So is baseball. I think football is made for TV, but
absolutely, football is made for TV.
Television.
Baseball, I can watch on TV, or I can go to the games.
But,
all right. Well, Ben, looks like we're done with Hoosiers. So hopefully everybody enjoyed us talking about Gene Hackman's sports film Hoosiers. Obviously, we're going to be coming out next week with another showing of a movie or a TV show, probably a movie. But we hope to see you there and hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any questions or requests, feel free, drop us a line at cinema-a2b.com. Nope, not there. Sorry. cinema-a2b@gmail.com. That's our website, is cinema-a2b.com. You can go there too, and that gets you contact info. Or you can go to our YouTube channel and post on this page for this video. But we thank you all very much, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.